The relationships we cultivate in our lives are essential to our well being, namely happiness and health. Why is this, though? We will begin to answer this question by exploring the types of relationships, family, friends, colleagues, and lovers we have in our lives and how they are measured. We will also be exploring the different aspects of happiness and health and show how the quantity and quality of relationships can affect our happiness and health. If you were to reflect on the best moments of your life, chances are they involved other people. We feel good sharing our experiences with others, and our desire for high quality relationships may be connected to a deep seated psychological impulse, the need to belong. Aristotle commented that humans are fundamentally social in nature. Despite the intuitive appeal of the idea that good relationships translate to more happiness, researchers must collect and analyze data to arrive at a reliable conclusion. This is kind of difficult with the concepts of relationships and happiness because both can be difficult to define. What counts as a relationship, anyways? A pet? An old friend from childhood you haven't seen in 10 years? You see, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what qualifies as happiness. So it's vital to define these terms because their definition serves as a guidelines by which they can be measured. This process is called oper, oper that word. That's what it's called. Operate. Oh, I don't know. That word. Scientifically speaking, the two major questions any researcher needs to answer before he or she can begin to understand how relationships and well-beings interact, they are: how do I best measure relationships and how do I best measure well-being? Let's begin with relationships. There are both objective and subjective ways to measure social relationships. Objective social variables are factors that are based on evidence rather than opinions. They focus on the presence and the frequency of different types of relationships and the degree of contact and the amount of shared activities between people. Example of these measures include participant marital status, the number of friends and work colleagues, and the size of their social networks. Each of these variables is factually based. Another objective social variable is social integration, or one's degree of integration into social networks. This can be measured by looking at the frequency and amount of social activity or contact one has with others. Subjective social variables, as the name suggests, are those that focus on the subjective qualities of social relationships. These are the products of personal opinions and feelings rather than facts. A key subject variable is social support, the extent to which individuals feel cared for, can receive help from others, and are part of a supportive network. Measures of social support ask people to report on their perceived levels of support, as well as their satisfaction with the support they receive. Other subjective social variables assess the nature of quality in social relationships themselves. That is, what types of relationships people have, and whether these social relationships are good or bad. Just as researchers must consider how to best measure relationships, they must also face the issue of measuring well-being. Well-being is a topic many people have an opinion about. If you and 9 other people were to write down your own definition of happiness or well-being, there's a good chance you'll end up with 10 unique answers. Some folk define happiness as a sense of peace, while others think of it as being healthy. Some people equate happiness with a sense of purpose, while others think of it as just another word for joy. Modern researchers have wrestled with this topic for decades. They acknowledge that both psychological and physical approaches are relevant to defining well-being. One prominent psychological dimension of well-being is happiness. In psychology, the scientific term for happiness is subjective well-being, which is defined by 3 different components: high life satisfaction, which refers to positive evaluations of one's life in general; positive feelings, which refers to the amount of positive emotions one experiences in life; and low negative feelings, which refers to the amount of negative emotions of one experiences in life. Presence of relationships. The first consideration when trying to understand how relationships influence well-being is the presence of relationships. Simply put, researchers need to know whether or not people have relationships. Are they married? Do they have many friends? Are they a member of a club? Finding this out can be accomplished by looking at objective social variables, such as the size of a person's social network or the number of friends they have. Researchers have discovered that the more social relationships people have, the more positively their sense of well-being is impacted. Another way of gaining an understanding of the presence of relationship is by looking at the absence of a relationship. A lack of social connections can lead to loneliness and depression. People lose well-being when social relationships are denied. Quality of relationships. Simply having a relationship is not in itself sufficient to produce well-being. We're all familiar with the awful relationships we encounter. In order for a relationship to improve well-being, it has to be a good one. Researchers have found that higher friendship quality is associated with increased happiness. Friendships aren't the only relationships that help, though. Researchers have found that high-quality relationships between parents and children are associated with increased happiness both for teenagers and adults. It may seem like common sense that good relationships translate to more happiness. You may be surprised to learn, however, that good relationships also translates to better health. Interestingly, both quality and quantity of social relationships can affect a person's health. Research has shown that having a large social network and high-quality relationships can be beneficial for your health, whereas having a small social network and poor-quality relationships can be detrimental to health. You're probably wondering why it might be the case that good relationships are linked to health. Well, for example, one reason is that friends and romantic partners might share health behaviors such as wearing seatbelts, exercising, or abstaining from heavy alcohol consumption. Another reason is that people who experience social support might feel less stress. It makes sense to consider the various types of relationships in our life when trying to determine just how relationships impact our well-being. For example, would you expect a person to derive the exact same happiness from an ex-spouse as from a child or coworker? Among the most important relationships for people is their long-time romantic partner. Most researchers began their investigation of this topic by focusing on intimate relationships because they are the closest form of social bond. Intimacy is more than just physical in nature, it also entails psychological closeness. Research findings suggest that having a single confidant, a person with whom you can be authentic and trust not to exploit your secrets and vulnerabilities, is more important to happiness than having a large social network. Although research frequently points to marriage being associated with higher rates of happiness, this does not guarantee that getting married will make you happy. The quality of one's marriage matters greatly. When a person remains in a problematic marriage, it takes an emotional toll. But what is it about marriages or bad relationships in general that takes such a toll on well-being? Research has pointed to conflict between partners as a major factor leading to lower subjective well-being. This makes sense. Negative relationships are linked to ineffective social support and are the source of stress. However, the unhappiness and dissatisfaction that occur in abusive relationships tend to dissipate once the relationships end. Overall, humans are social animals and we prefer living together in groups. We cluster in families, in cities, and in groups of friends. In fact, most people spend relatively few of their hours alone. Even introverts report feeling happier when they are with others. So yes, being surrounded by people and feeling connected to others appears to be a natural impulse.